Mother Jones is a terrific story on Ron Robinson and James Taylor. Well, who are those folks? Well, they're critical players in the right-wing circles. So, for example, they're both board members of Young America's Foundation. Now, that's the group that wound up co-founding the Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC. You know, you've heard a lot about that. That's where they all go and speak, including Rush Limbaugh gave a famous speech there, Breitbart did, etc. And they also run the youth group Young Americans for Freedom. They own and manage the Ronald Reagan Ranch. They train conservative journalists. They're also on the board of two other conservative groups, Citizens United. You remember them? The guys, of course, who famously brought that Supreme Court case. And the American Conservative Union, which operates CPAC as well. So they're connected to all of these different groups. But here comes the interesting part. These legitimate members of the right wing are also connected to some other groups. For example, America's PAC, since 2004, they have given $5,000 to the Charles Martel Society. That just happens to be a white nationalist group. I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a second. And it turns out that our friend Taylor, James Taylor, has founded America's PAC in 1983. And so since he founded it, giving the money to Charles Martel group is interesting. And by the way, they've also given, as you just saw, $5 million to Republican candidates. So the Republican candidates are very familiar with these guys. They keep taking their money. All right. Now, what else has the Martel Society done? Well, they published two different publications called the Occidental Quarterly and the Occidental Observer. Now, I'm going to tell you what they've written about in just a second as well. But let's now move on to other things that they've done. There's a whole wide web. Mother Jones explains it. For example, Taylor was the vice president of a group called National Policy Institute. Okay? Well, what was the original mission statement of the National Policy Institute when Taylor was their vice president? It was, quote, to elevate the consciousness of whites, ensure our biological and cultural continuity, and protect our civil rights. Now, that is not unclear, okay? They're obviously a white power group. Now, you can call it white supremacy, white nationalism, white power. They prefer the term white nationalism because they're trying to protect their culture and continuity. Don't worry, you don't have to read between the tea leaves. We got more. In 2007, they also put out a report called The State of White America. And in it, they said the Brown versus Board of Education, that of course desegregated the United States of America, quote, was arguably the worst decision in the court's 216-year history. How is that for clear? I can't believe that you put whites and blacks together, man. We had them nice and segregated in the South. We had the white culture and, you know, bloodline clean and protected. Brown versus Board of Education, worst decision in 216 years. Is it clear yet which direction they're going in? They've given these guys, through at least that one group, America's PAC, given $5 million to Republican candidates, run their top PAC, their get-together, etc., with others. They're on the boards of all these groups. Okay. Ron Robinson, when asked about all this, said, wait a minute, it's preposterous to suggest there's any racial component to America's PAC's grants. We have supported Alan Keyes, Ken Blackwell, Alan West, and others. In other words, we paid a bunch of Uncle Toms, and you guys are still complaining? That's 3 black guys we paid. Gee, I wonder why they use those guys. I can't quite tell. Whenever they're charged with racism, like, for example, when they say Brown versus Board of Education, worst decision in U.S. history, they say, what? I paid off a black guy. Look, Alan West took my money. Sick, man. If you're not clear yet, National Policy Institute says the dispossession of white Americans will have catastrophic effects for the entire world, not just for our people. Now, that all seems pretty damning, right? So then you go back to James Taylor and you ask him about it, and he says, look, you've got the NAACP and B'nai B'rith. Why not something for white people? To suggest that any of this would be racial is just outrageous. And the Republican Party taking money from these guys, putting them on all their esteemed boards. Well, golly gee, what a wonderful coincidence that these guys, and we ran the Southern strategy. The Southern strategy was a racist strategy meant to get racist votes in the South and say, oh, look, the Democrats gave blacks civil rights, attacking the culture of white people. And then it turns out some of the guys who run these boards, who run these conservative organizations, are deeply racist. Wow. Didn't see that coming. But if you think they're just racist, no, you're missing out on one other element. They're also anti-Semitic. The Occidental Quarterly, the publication we mentioned earlier, gave a $10,000 prize for anyone who can come up with the best books on group evolutionary strategies of the Jewish people. You know how the Jews are always going in groups and they got these strategies, and that's why they're successful, because they got these group evolutionary strategies. It sounds like eugenics crap. Not sold yet? No problem. The Occidental Observer has an archive on, quote, the Jews and financial collapse. Yeah, that'll do it. Okay. I'm sure Moynihan, who was the head of one of the top banks, and Vikram Pandit, somehow part of the Jewish conspiracy of that financial collapse. What's funny is that right-wing Israelis don't mind getting into bed with these kind of right-wing Americans, thinking, oh, no, it's okay. They're our friends. They're not your friends. They can't wait for your destruction.